And now, your feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled movie review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck. Alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he's tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt just hanging out on a Monday night recording some overdue reviews. We just talked about two of cinema's finest with Morbius and The Bubble, but
You guys can
luckily
get those right now if you want.
things are going to blast off with this one. So
Today we are reviewing Richard Linklater's Apollo 10.5, A Space Age Childhood, starring Glen Powell, Zachary Levi, Jack Black, Josh Wiggins, Lee Eddy, Bill Wise, Natalie Lamaru, Jessica Bryn Cohen, Danielle Guibault, and more.
you should also
Milo
mention Milo
Coy.
Coy, not
My
to be
bad.
confused with Milo from Morbius.
That's where I got confused. Sorry.
Yeah.
I skipped because they said Jack Black and then I forgot to go above. So Milo is the main character in the movie.
Yeah.
Milo
And
Coy.
Milo is Jack Black is the voice of the adult version of
Yeah,
Milo who
that's
does
where
the
I
voiceover
messed up.
narration. Yeah.
That's where I messed up, everyone. Apologies to Milo. But we are
Apologize.
oh, that's good. That's good. See, that's like my morbidious. Anyways, today we're reviewing Apollo
Still
10
trying
and a
to make
half.
it happen.
Eric, how are you? You've already kind of explained it. We've reviewed two movies we absolutely hated
Yeah.
with Morbius and The Bubble. If you guys have seen those movies, I know a lot of people did see Morbius on the weekend. Go check out our review. We went full spoilers for kind of both of those movies since we're doing these on the Monday after they came out. So fair warning on that. But I'm excited to talk to you about this one, Eric, because I'm not as hot on it as I think you are. But that being said, compared to those other two movies, it is a masterwork and an enjoyable movie at least. So let's get into it. What you think about Apollo 10.5?
I liked it. I don't think I loved it, and I think the reason why it's keeping me from kind of embracing it the way I love other Richard Linklater movies like the Before films and Boyhood is the rotoscoping, and Linklater's interested in that and has been since segments in Waking Life and in A Scanner Darkly, and again, it's an aesthetic choice, it's an artistic decision that he's made. You have to appreciate and respect that, and you can say, oh well, no, this would have been better as a live action movie or a different form of animation, which I think probably would be so if you are not a fan of the look, because especially with kind of like the blurring effects in the background and kind of almost the
If you don't
weird.
buy into the animation style, it's hard to kind of buy into the
Yeah.
movie.
That being said, I think what Linklater does well with a lot of these movies when it comes to, films that are coming from a place that is very personal to him is that, he's great at making hangout movies, specifically films that are about character first and plot third or fourth, because this is really, there's no plot to this whatsoever. Literally, the setup of this film is that this is taking place in 1969, the summer that Apollo 11 blasted off into outer space and landed on the moon, and it's seen from the point of view of this young boy who's about to kind of embark on adolescence himself, and sort of in a moment of time in both history and growth, that things are changing in the world around him and how everything is changing culturally, socially, and all these kind of moments in this one microcosm, in this one summer. And that is basically it. There's this kind of false framing device that kind of would make you think that, like, oh, the story is, this kid having this kind of fantasy about, being the first astronaut to land, the first kid astronaut to land with Apollo 10.5, because the people at NASA near Houston made the wrong specifications with the
Pretty funny
actual.
bit.
It is like that is a funny moment, and again, like, that's like kid logic coming into play, where it's like, how would a kid sort of rationalize, like, NASA creating this ship that's tailor made for him and not anybody else? And well, the reasoning behind that is that they just, like, they had the wrong mechanics
It
and
was
the
a
wrong.
mistake.
Yeah. And I really do like
But they
Glen
spent so
Powell
much
in that.
money, so they still needed to test it
Yeah,
with someone. Yeah.
yeah, they need to justify the cost, which is like almost like when you buy, a movie on Blu-ray and you're like, you spend like so much money. It's like, I'm justifying this because I like it so much, and like I gotta give it an extra star bump because of that. And I really do like Glenn Powell specifically in that scene, because it also reminds you of how good he was in Everybody Wants Some, which is a
What a
great
movie. What a
hangout movie
movie.
as well, and weirdly underrated in Linklater's filmography, and unfairly kind of um, you know tossed off as just simply a minor Dazed and Confused, which both movies I think are great. Yeah, there's not a lot here that is like mind-blowing or revolutionary. I think the most interesting aspect of this film is that, even though it's kind of, looking back fondly at a nostalgic moment in Linklater's own childhood, it's semi-autobiographical. He grew up in the Houston area, in the suburbs. It weirdly is cynical as well, which I thought was fascinating, because the way that it's looking at it, it's not saying just like, oh, these were better times than now, and like, the generation that is growing up, like, it's all lost on them completely how everything was amazing at this time. I think it's saying like, oh, there was a time where the US was a country that was a leader, and it was cutting edge and innovative and truly one of the great countries of the world, and it shot for further than the stars. And now look at what the US has become, and you know especially his
Sure.
generation. I
Yeah.
think it is cynical of
The
what,
current state.
yeah, the current state, but not of you know millennials or
No, no,
generations,
yeah.
more of his own generation than anything else. Like, the imagination is gone, the
Yeah.
love is gone. Like, what happened to all of that?
Yeah, I agree. Um yeah, I'm a little softer on it, but I think we're still in similar territory where I thought the movie was okay. I'm with you on the rotoscoping where it's hard to get past it. I just don't love the look of rotoscoping. I'm 1,000% with you where I'm like, release the live action cut of this, where I'm like, I think I would have enjoyed it a little bit more. Um, if it was live action. That being said, even if it was live action, I found myself, I totally understand where you're coming from. And I know a lot of Linklater stuff is like this. Sometimes it works for me, like in Everybody Wants Some. I love the Before movies. Obviously, people love Boyhood. I don't love Boyhood. I thought Boyhood relied a lot on its gimmick, and I thought the actual content of the movie wasn't as interesting as the gimmick. And that's fine. That's partly what the movie is. It's a gimmick. Um, I just thought in Boyhood and in this, similar kind of things of a kid growing up in a specific time and over a period of time. And in this, it just lists off a lot of things that he enjoyed doing or he remembers from when he was a kid. And I called it Ready Player One for boomers because, like, it literally, what that book does, Ready Player One, and what the movie, Spielberg kind of elevated the material a little bit. I know people don't love that movie. I like it. And I liked the book. Sorry, everyone. The book is and even when I remember listening to that audiobook narrated by Will Wheaton. Eric always points that out.
This should have been
Um,
narrated by Will
um,
Wheaton. Would you have given it a higher rating?
yeah. But I remember even when I was listening to the Ready Player One audiobook before the movie came out, I remember going over to your house when we watched American Sniper. Remember this?
Oh God,
I went
yeah.
over and I was talking to you and Kyle about it. And I'm like, I'm listening to this audiobook, Ready Player One. Like, I'm having, mixed feelings on it because, like, obviously I like the ideas that are in there. It's Willy Wonka, but for the 80s nerd video gamer generation. And I'm like, there's some cool stuff in there. But his writing style is just listing things off that he liked or he remembered. Like, it's like, here's a list of things that I liked, and it'll make you feel nostalgic for these things. And I feel like that's what this movie does. It sets up its plot, which you said, which there's not much of a plot, but it sets it up. Then it kind of takes a detour to just go, oh, he hangs out for a while, and I'm going to tell you everything I enjoyed living in Houston in that time period. I'm going to list every TV show I watched. I'm going to list every board game I played, everywhere that I went to go get food, and everywhere I went with my friends, and like everything we did. And it's just like, to me, it started after a while. I'm just like, okay, I get it. You grew up during that time. That's great. I'm glad you had a great time, but you're just listing shit off. And it's like, to me, it wasn't a hangout movie because it just goes, oh, when I was at home with my brothers and sisters, we watched this was on TV at this time, and this was at this time. And here's the logos for all these TV shows that you remember, where it was Knight Rider and, or not right. Knight Rider may not have been that. That was the 80s.
No, that was the 80s, man.
80s. Sorry. I mean, I'm
Dark
thinking of
Shadows. You
Hawaii
had
5-0, Hawaii 5-0, all these different
Batman.
kind of Batman, the logos for all those classic shows. Sorry, I don't know why I went to Knight Rider. Great show, Knight Rider.
Just a huge Hoff fan.
But you know what I mean, of just like listing. It's just a giant list of stuff he's nostalgic for, and to me, there's not that much interesting there. And then when you layer that on top of the rotoscoping, it just kind of made me want to get through it. And it wasn't that I wasn't enjoying myself, because like I'm in that middle ground of like, I'm not enjoying myself, and I didn't dislike the movie. I just kind of went through the motions, and I was just like, I think maybe I would tell my dad to watch this movie, right? Like, I just feel like maybe he wouldn't get past the rotoscoping either, but like, I really do. I don't mean it as an insult when I say it's Ready Player One for a boomer generation. It's just like, every generation kind of needs, something to feel nostalgic for. And here's a list of things you remember. And it's going to make you feel like, oh, I remember that. I remember playing with my friends back then, or watching that on TV with my family. And like, I get it. And the movie's not trying to be much more than that. But it reminded me of why Linklater like is hit or miss, where I don't think that this is a miss, but I've been kind of flat on a lot of his stuff just because it doesn't get its hooks in me. But like, I think the Before trilogy is incredible, and Everybody Wants Some was one of my favorite movies of that year. So I like that kind of hangout more than something like this. So I don't know. I'm mixed on it. I like Glen Powell. I like Zachary Levi. Like, I like, those interjections from them as they were going through some of the space training, and I like the funny bit of being like, we made it too small and we can't send a monkey up there because he can't do what we need him to do. And like, that stuff is funny. It's just, I don't know. To me, overstayed its welcome a little bit. And I'm like, I get it. Give me a list of more things you remember.
Right. See, I don't disagree with you in the sense of like it is kind of fondly remembering a time when there was this moment in history. And again, like you're seeing a lot of filmmakers tackle the late 60s, early 70s, even with Tarantino with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and sort of revisionist history of
Edgar Wright.
yeah,
Well,
and those moments in sort of them coming of age and growing up. And Linklater's older than both Tarantino and Wright,
Edgar
but
Wright. Yeah.
um, there's something about his kind of laid back quality to his approach and the tone
Yeah.
of this movie that I liked more than Ready Player One, which I
Oh,
feel is
I get
so obnoxious and bombards you with so like it's just adrenaline to the point where like
I'd
you are
prefer
completely
Ready Player
burnt
One
out by
hangout
it.
in that apocalyptic universe or something like that you don't necessarily go into the fucking Oasis or whatever the
See,
hell it's called.
I'm all about eating ham 5 times a week in different styles, and I actually kind of I again like your criticisms are valid. I just think that like when it comes to like some of the montages when he's talking about like, oh, these are the things that kids would do when they were outside, and like it's surprising that we kind of even lived through this stuff. Like it
Oh,
kind of is
totally. Yeah.
like that stuff is. And it also weirdly also like there's a moment that reminded me of something from like Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life, where it's like you look at humanity's place in this moment in time and how it kind of all culminates in this kind of big historic moment, but then also you have all these other major historic moments happening around the same time with civil right movements and cultural changes and just again like seeing a kid kind of come of age. And then there are, I think, a couple small little moments that I found very moving where like the family's coming back from watching a movie at a drive-in, and the dad takes the kid out
Oh,
of
totally.
the
Yeah.
car because he's fallen asleep, and takes him to the
Carries him
bedroom. Like
inside. Yeah.
that those little moments I think are very kind of moving in a way. And I even like the dad when like they're going to the drive-in and they're sneaking in like this is a big family, like 5 of the kids, and like they get like the rates or the prices for under 12 because it's like for free or something, and then he just does
And
the line, it's
half
like,
of them are hiding in the trunk
yeah,
and in
damn
the
straight.
things. Yeah, yeah, and stuff like that is great. And don't get me wrong, like it even made me like I don't think you have to be Richard Linklater's age to enjoy
No.
some of the stuff there, because even like you said, some of the stuff with the kids just playing, like the card and the bicycle to make that like kind of like sound when your spokes would go around. I'm like, that's all shit we continued to do as kids. At least I did in the 90s and stuff like that too. So it just growing up and being a kid, you're gonna find something in this movie. And I feel like that's ultimately why, you know, I didn't not like the movie. It's just for me got a little grating by the end of it, but I totally see that. I like those more human moments. I like the family hanging out. It reminded me of stories my dad would tell about his big family or whatever. Yeah, we didn't live in Houston near NASA, but like, or I even like that the idea of that everyone works at NASA, but your dad has the shitty job at NASA. Like that stuff is funny. Like that is
Yeah.
a funny bit. Like it would be impressive to anyone that you work at NASA, but you're like, my dad's not one of the astronauts or he's not one of the engineers. He's like this guy. And I'm like, where everyone at school, their parents all work at NASA. So it's not even like you have that up on someone is like, oh, my dad works at NASA. It's like, oh, what's your dad do at NASA? It's like, oh, he's this guy. And then that's kind of a embarrassment to a kid. And I think that stuff is clever and funny. And I'm not against like a hangout movie, especially during this time period. And I really do think I would have liked it a little bit more if it wasn't rotoscoped. And I know it's just a hard thing to get past.
Yeah.
And like, uh, and that's kind of why I'm surprised that, he's still playing with it and he must like it, which is totally fair. It's just um for me I just don't love the look of it. And I'm like, man, if I want to see the just raw footage of this, and I know you probably don't have a cut done with all the other animation that you do on top of the actual footage you shot, but or I don't know exactly how rotoscoping works. Do they cut the whole movie and then rotoscope it, or do they rotoscope specific scenes and then edit it that way? I don't know.
It's a good question. I mean, that's something you should ask Dick Linklater and see if he
I'm
knows the
down to
answer.
talk to him,
The
but
other thing that I do really like as well, when it comes to the connection between your parents and your grandparents, and talking about like how the dad gets in all those kids to the drive-in theater, is
Mhm.
when you share traits with your parents and your grandparents, and like everybody's scamming the system in one way or another, or like
Yeah.
trying to make things last. Like you see the one grandfather kind of like keeping nails for as long as he possibly
Oh,
can and
that was a nice
recycling them.
moment too.
Or
Yeah.
then when the kids go to the arcade and how they're trying to get as much out of
Yes. Yeah.
a
Quarter.
nickel, a quarter, with a drink, and like playing multiple games, and how there's like a system to that.
That stuff I do like.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like, if you notice, the stuff we're focusing on wasn't that listy kind of stuff. Like that was the stuff where it went on. I'm like, all right, you listed like 7 more board games than you needed to, and like that went on with the TV shows and board games and different things like that. But I like those little moments that do bring you into that era more so than just listing off shit that was from that era, right? Like that moment of time of being a quarter could last you. It could get you a soda, it could get you a little snack, and it could get you one game on a pinball machine. But if you were good enough at that pinball game, you could ride that for like an entire afternoon, right? Like that is awesome. Like
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff I want. And that's like growing up as a kid in that era would be like the shit I'm interested in. I remember my dad telling me about that, because like even like those are the stories that I almost want to I don't talk to my dad enough about that kind of stuff, or it makes me want to go back and listen to stories like that. Because even of us as a kid, I remember getting it's everyone has that story, right? And it's universal. It's just inflation has changed it. So it's just like when we were kids, I remember what a toonie could get me, which was like a 99-cent bottle of pop. It could get me a bag of chips, and then I might have something, we didn't have to go to arcades. Even in the 90s, we would go home and play Super Nintendo or something like that, right? Like every generation could have a movie like Apollo 10 and a half. And I like those movies about kids growing up in a certain period of time and what they would get up to. And then adding in that twist of it being near NASA is a fun story and a fun hook. It's just the rotoscoping and kind of the listicle kind of nature the movie takes a detour from is just like, um, I had very mixed feelings by the end, but ultimately thought it was all right.
You thought like the main character is going to start singing, "These are a few of my favorite things."
Anyways, that's the stuff. And that's the stuff in Boyhood I didn't love either. It's just like, I got to rewatch Boyhood, but like when I first watched it, I really couldn't get past. I'm like, all right, you guys all love this movie because of how he shot it. And I really feel like, and maybe I'm just not seeing it for what it is, which it's called Boyhood. Of course, it's just things that he got up to as he was growing up. But to me, there wasn't anything interesting in that. It was like, yeah, I grew up. I'm the same age as this kid. Yeah, I played with a fucking Game Boy. I understand. There's nothing interesting here. And I'm like, so like to me, it went through the motions of like, okay, here's a fucking a year later. Let's catch up with this kid and what he's doing. It's like, yeah, I lived through all that shit. It's not that interesting to me. This and Mad Max are going to be the two takes that kill me. Or
Now, do you
get me
think part
killed.
of that as well is because
Um,
you lived through it? Do you think that because like something
Probably.
like Apollo 10 and a half, or even like Dazed and Confused, like the way that Everybody Wants Some, like there's a lot of stuff in there that is referencing similar things but of that period,
Yeah,
and because
totally.
we weren't around in that period,
It's
it
more interesting to me.
it's more
Yeah.
charming.
Yes, and charming. Yeah, I would say both of those things. And Boyhood, again, much like Mad Max, will give another shot to. I've only watched Boyhood the one time, where Mad Max I've watched like 4 or 5 times, and it just never works for me.
You're wrong.
And I know, Eric. I'm probably wrong about Boyhood as well, but anyway, it's just I like the movie. Don't get me, I probably sound more negative than I actually am.
It's good to be critical.
I'm gonna give the movie a 3 out of 5. Like I think it's totally watchable. It's mildly enjoyable. But I don't think it's anything more than that. And I did have kind of some issues with just the listy nature of kind of its not storytelling, but even its hangout moments.
Yeah, I mean, I still didn't necessarily love it the way that I love the before films or Boyhood or Everybody Wants Some or Dazed and Confused. Um, but I just enjoyed it for what it was, and I felt like of those kind of movies where it doesn't really require a lot of plot and more so just kind of focused on the characters and just again kind of creating a mood and atmosphere for the time. It works. The only thing that's really holding it back, I think, is the rotoscoping, and again, you have to respect the choice that he made to use it. That's his decision, and that's something that the filmmaker wants to do. And yeah, I could see some people doing kind of a parody version of Release, the non-rotoscope cut. Oh God.
We should start that
I
movement,
mean, Linklater fans are too laid back, I think, to
No,
like
no one's doing that. I
no.
assure you, everyone watched this. They went, "That's pretty good," and then moved on. Like,
Exactly. And that's the kind of movie it is. Like I think
yeah,
like Richard Linklater would even tell you that like I made this movie is just kind of like, oh, this is like a kind of like fond
yeah, he was
memory to
nostalgic for his
reflect
childhood.
on.
Yeah,
And I actually really liked Jack Black's voiceover.
yeah,
I
so
thought it
did
was
I.
really restrained and wistful and contemplative
I
in a
love
way
Jack
that
Black.
yeah, I mean like he has moments where he can be very enthusiastic in his delivery, but
Glen
it's
Powell
also
too.
very
Great.
kind of like just again like mindful of the time and very kind of nuanced in a way that like I don't think Jack Black is often given that opportunity to kind of be that way, especially when just doing a voice.
Yeah, I'm excited to see Glen Powell in Top Gun because I feel like that guy. Um,
I feel like he should be a bigger star than he
yeah,
already is.
that's what I mean, right? And I
Yes,
feel like since everybody wants some, he's popped up in Hidden Figures and um
which is also funny because this that connects to this with
yeah,
the
totally.
with John Glenn. So
Yeah. So I'm excited to see him kind of in a big movie like Top Gun, which we are way closer to than I thought.
playing a can,
Um
baby. I'm gonna give Apollo 10 and a
oh,
half a
sorry.
3.5 out of 5.
Yeah, yeah. So we're kind of in the same
Yeah,
range, just
we're not
varying
completely out of
degrees.
orbit.
Thank you all for listening. We have other reviews which we would love for you guys to check out for Morbius and The Bubble. Um I'm sorry if you watched either of those movies, but if you want someone to have a cathartic release with and talk
A
about how
group
much they
therapy session, if you
yeah,
will.
how much they also did not like them, and if you did like them, I'm sorry. Um Go check those out on Untitled Movie Reviews or on YouTube. We also have some great content out for Everything Everywhere All at Once, a movie that Eric and I are absolutely in love with. Go check out that review on YouTube and podcast services. We also have interviews with the cast and crew of that movie. So go check those out. The Daniels, Ki Hui Kwan, and it just fantastic stuff. The movie that I'm obsessed with. I can't wait to see again. So go check those out as well. One stop shop over on Letterboxd at Untitled_movies. You can find all of our reviews, our interviews, our main shows. No main show this week. We're doing these interviews we did for Everything Everywhere All at Once as kind of the replacement this week, unless something crazy happens where we have to, jump on and talk to one another. But I feel like after the Oscars, we could use a little bit of a break
Yeah.
of like, and we'll put out some stuff for a movie we really love. So go check that out. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at untitledmoviepodcast.com. And you can follow me on all the social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Marchand. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for Dick Linklater.